So, where did religion actually come from? For a long time, the common story we've all heard is that it's this slow evolution, right? A gradual climb from primitive superstitions up towards complex belief. But what if that entire story is completely backwards? Today, we're diving into a theological text that totally flips the script on the history of faith. So, let's start with that big question. Did religion just sort of evolve from primitive superstition? This is the foundation of the dominant academic theory, the one that shaped our understanding for, gosh, over a century now. It suggests religion started simple, almost crude, and grew from there. But is that the full picture? Well, the source material we're looking at today argues not even close. Okay, first things first, let's really get a handle on the viewpoint our source is pushing back against. It's a very popular theory in historical and anthropological circles. You can almost picture it like a ladder. Religion is this ladder, and humanity is just slowly, rung by rung, climbing its way up. Now, this evolutionary theory is really built on a few key ideas. It kicks off with this notion that we humans have an instinctive desire to worship. And from that perspective, idolatry isn't seen as a corruption, but as a necessary first step, an upward reach of man trying to understand something bigger. Even the really brutal practices you see in some ancient religions are kind of excused as just products of primitive mentalities. And in this model, the Hebrew faith is often positioned as just a later, more polished stage in this long, long process. And this quote gets right to the core assumption of the whole theory. The idea that early people were just fundamentally different from us, intellectually simpler. It suggests there's this mental gap that we can't really cross to understand them. And you can see how that one perspective shapes the entire interpretation of ancient history and religion. Okay, so we've laid out the standard historical model, but our source material basically throws down the gauntlet and asks us to think about a pretty radical alternative. What if this whole widely accepted narrative isn't just a little off, but fundamentally wrong? And the text doesn't mince words. This is its direct, unambiguous rejection of that evolutionary theory. It's claiming this entire academic framework is built on a faulty foundation. So if that's not the story, what is? So let's get into the source's counterargument. It doesn't frame this as a simple disagreement between scholars. Oh no, it frames this as a fundamental error in how we've been reading history. An error that it claims can only be corrected by a totally different source of knowledge, divine revelation. So why does the source claim historians got it so spectacularly wrong? Well, it points to two big problems. First, insufficient data. Scholars are trying to piece together the past with just tiny fragments. And second, it critiques what it calls pseudo-scholarship, basically suggesting that researchers are looking in all the wrong places, and they're therefore, as the text puts it, ever learning but never coming to a knowledge of the truth. Now, to really make its case, the source deconstructs that evolutionary theory with four distinct rebuttals. We're going to walk through each one to see exactly how this alternate history gets built. All right, the first rebuttal. This one goes right after the very origin of what the text calls heathen religions. So instead of this slow, organic evolution driven by some spiritual need, this text argues these religions were deliberately engineered. They weren't an upward reach of man at all, but a top-down tool for gaining political power. To back this up, the source cites the historian Josephus and points to the biblical figure Nimrod. The argument is that he created his own religious system for a very clear political goal, to break humanity's loyalty to God and redirect all of that loyalty and fear toward himself. Okay, point number two. This one builds directly on the first, but it shifts the focus from where idolatry came from to what its purpose was. So while the evolutionary theory sees idolatry as, a primitive starting point, this view argues the absolute opposite. It says a true revealed religion existed first, and these other systems were created specifically to compete with it and ultimately to destroy it. And this quote, which the source attributes to Nimrod, really captures that competitive spirit. It's not a suggestion, it's framed as a direct command to choose a side, abandon the established religion of Shem, and adopt this new, man-made system. On to the third rebuttal. This one directly challenges that earlier assumption we talked about, the one about the primitive minds of ancient people. According to this text, the architects of these new religions were not ignorant or simple-minded. Far from it. It says they were intellectually sophisticated apostates, people who actually knew the original, revealed religion, but deliberately chose to turn away from it and create something new. And the text even lays out their playbook. These sophisticated apostates, it claims, didn't just invent their systems out of thin air. First, they started with concepts people already knew and believed. Then, they'd rationalize and twist those truths to serve a new agenda. And then, and this is the crucial part, they'd make them way more appealing by allowing for all the vices and indulgences the original religion forbade. And that brings us to the fourth and final rebuttal, which is honestly the most sweeping claim of them all. What it's arguing here is that any bits of truth, any ethical principles or sound philosophy that you might find in other ancient cultures, they're not independent discoveries. Nope. This text claims they are all just distorted echoes, remnants of the original principles that were revealed at the very beginning of time. So after deconstructing one theory and building up a completely different one, we're left with two starkly different histories of human belief. And seeing them side by side really makes the contrast pop. On one side, you've got the evolutionary view, a story of humanity climbing upwards from primitive origins, with idolatry as an early step, and truth discovered through research. On the other side, you have the revealed view, a top-down story where truth was perfect from the start, idolatry was a later corruption designed to fight it, and real knowledge comes directly from revelation. One is a story of human discovery, the other of divine disclosure. And that leaves us with the central, provocative question posed by the text we've just examined. When the story told by historical research seems to conflict with the story told by divine revelation, which one actually tells the truer story of our past?